So, Steve, just to sort of put a round up on all of us, we all qualified at the same time. And I think we're quite unique and special because our final assessments were right in the middle of the COVID-19 outbreak.
Wow.
So, but we did it, and I think the biggest problem for all of us now is getting clients, which is obvious, really. That's, it's going to be, I'm not going to say it's going to be too difficult, but it's certainly got its challenges that others haven't had. So we're looking for every opportunity, and that's why I've asked you to join us, really. We're going to ask you a couple of questions. It's just to give us a little bit of guidance, I suppose, and the more information we've got, the better. So if you want to introduce yourself, if you don't mind, and then we'll throw a couple of questions at you, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Stephen Burns. Believe it or not, I've been doing NLP and hypnotherapy for 21 years, believe it or not. I know that maybe looks as if I started when I was about 12. I've got my mum's skin, going a bit grey, but there you go. But yeah, so I was pretty much the youngest. I started off, I originally wanted to become a hypnotherapist, but they didn't really teach hypnotherapy much in Scotland. In fact, there wasn't too much of it in the UK. So I started reading about NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, which I know some, if not all of you, are aware of. So I went down and did a training course with the co-creator of NLP, Dr. Richard Bandler, Paul McKenna, which I'm sure most of you know, now retired to over in Los Angeles, I think. He's over there now. And a guy called Michael Breen, who's very good trainer as well. And I think at the time I was 21 years old, so I'm 43 this year. And I think I was probably the youngest in the course by about 15 years. It just wasn't really what people in their 20s did at that time. Thankfully, that's changing. A lot younger people are getting involved in it now, which is fantastic. We're seeing that on our live trainings over the last few years. But it was certainly quite rare for somebody quite as young to get involved in that. But I was just had such a passion and fascination for psychology. Basically, I was just a nosy bastard. I just liked to people watch. And so I just kind of put the label around it. I'll do NLP, I'll do hypnotherapy. And just found that sort of stuff really fascinating. So over the last 20 years, I've been working, with clients one-to-one. I don't see quite as many clients now, simply because of all the other projects that are ongoing. But then from that, I started to do group work. So we do live NLP practitioners, master practitioners, live hypnotherapy training courses up in Scotland, and have done that for roughly around about the last 12 years. And recently got more into online learning. And to be honest, even though I've been involved in all of this for 21 years, I still feel like there's always more to learn. And I think that, it's like every day you discover something new about people, or you discover something new about the nature of hypnosis, or how to use NLP or certain techniques for change. And I think it's that fascination, it's that passion that really just keeps you going, irrespective of how long you've been doing it for. So thanks, John, for asking me along here. Like you said, it's good to put some faces to names. Who, for those of you who have done the Udemy courses before, because online learning is fantastic, but it does become a little bit disconnected when you just see names. I love the live stuff, so that's one of the downsides. So it's great to be asked along here. Just chat.
It's an honour for us. It really is. It's for you to join us, such a small group of people. I think that says everything about you, to be honest, and it certainly gives you credit. And I do remember when I talked to you the very first time after doing your online hypnotherapy course. I think I spoke to you and said, could I go ahead and do this? Could I go out now and do it? And you were quite right. You suggested, no, go and do some life-to-life training, because it's so important. But what it did, it set me up, and so that was great for me, really. So thank you for that. And I'm sure all the others are enjoying your courses as well. There's a few of us here that have done it, and there'll be more in the future, and they'll certainly pass it on. It's a great way of learning, isn't it? It really is. So we've got a couple of questions for you, Stephen, if you don't mind. Margaret, you had a couple of questions. Can you remember what they were, or do you want me to read them out for you?
My first question was around parts training.
Yeah.
Parts work, and how do you know when to use parts work, and what would it be commonly used for?
Mm. That's a good question. So just to quickly check, Margaret, so you've done hypnotherapy training. Have you done any NLP, or was that included in the hypnotherapy?
It was included in the hypnotherapy, but it was only touched upon. I've done an NLP certificate before that, so I've got experience from that point of view, and it's also included in the human givens training. It's part and parcel of everything. So I'm not unfamiliar with NLP.
Okay.
I'm actually on the parts. You do a lot more on parts than we experience in our training. It was touched on, but it's never been enlarged. I also did some training with a man over in Derbyshire who uses the parts method for pain control.
Sure.
And I was really blown away by the efficacy of using parts. But I don't have enough experience to be able to say, well, I understand it and I know where it comes from, the 6-step reframe and all that. But when would I didn't have the experience really to say, this is when I would use that.
This is when you would use it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think your question is, I think what you're really talking about there, if I was to kind of pan the camera back a little bit on your question, Margaret, is what you're really asking is about technique selection.
Yes.
And this is a really commonly asked question, especially like our live students ask this quite a lot too.
Yeah.
Is especially if you've done like NLP, you've done hypnotherapy, what you end up with is like a bag full of about 25 techniques, and it's kind of like, oh my God, what was I supposed to do with all these techniques? It's like technique overload. And this is a really common question where people say, which technique should I use with which problem? And often that question possibly isn't the right question, because a lot of the time you don't really know which technique to use until you actually speak to the client. What you tend to find is that they'll give you certain cues or certain clues that will lead you to select one technique over another one. So it is very much about spending a bit of time, doing some research, asking about how the client uniquely structures their subjective experience. And then from that, you'll find that a technique will just kind of present itself. And I know that sounds quite a terrifying thing to tell people who haven't really seen too many clients, because you want to prepare. So you want to be ready for what you're going to take the client through. So I'll give you a couple of tips on how to do that pretty soon, actually, because there's a few ways around it. Just to give you an example of how a technique of how this tends to work in my mind anyway. I was working with a client quite a few years ago now, and she had a phobia of spiders. And then there's a classic technique in NLP called the fast phobia technique.
Yeah, I know that.
Sometimes called the rewind technique.
Yeah,
as well,
yeah, very familiar.
Generally very, very good for certain types of phobias, but it depends, because some people call something a phobia, but it ends up not being something you would use the fast phobia technique for. But when I was having a conversation with her, she said to me, I just can't see myself being comfortable around spiders. Now, what we often do in NLP, and I think it's quite good to do this when you're using hypnotherapy as well, is to take what the client says as a literal description of what's going on in their subjective experience. So I basically responded to her and I said, well, okay, so if you were to see yourself being comfortable around about spiders, what would the picture look like? So I'm literally just meeting her at her map of the worlds. I'm taking what she's saying as a literal description of what's going on inside her mind, and then just taking it further and just sort of extending it.
Yeah.
And so we spent a good portion of time, building up this picture of how she would look if she was comfortable around spiders. And I said, okay, well, now that you've got that picture, what would it be like if you were to step into it and feel it? And to be honest, that was the solution. Now, I did a lot of other things around about it. I didn't even do the fast phobia technique. I did some hypnotherapy just to make it more real and make the experience more powerful for her. But ultimately, at the end of the day, that was the intervention. That was the technique. Okay. So you do want it to kind of almost like present itself. Now, when it comes to parts, the kind of things you're looking for is like, usually they'll say it in the language. So they'll say things like, well, a part of me wants this and a part of me wants that. It's like, well, just even if they don't say it explicitly, there'll be almost like some kind of implied conflict. So it's kind of like they're like, what is, and it's kind, you can kind of see it. So I think just paying attention to what the client is saying and how they're saying it, and if they're revealing any explicit conflict where there's some kind of decision that's going on, then parts is amazing, especially the parts resolution thing too. If not, then you can go hunting for it. You can lead the client. You don't necessarily have to be 100% clean with it. So you can say things like, it kind of sounds like there's a part of you that's looking for this. Does that make sense? And they'll tell you. If it doesn't make sense to them, they'll just go, nah, not really. I don't know what you're talking about. But if they turn around and then go, yeah, that does make sense, then you can start to go down that route.
Okay.
You can also even just give them an explanation of what parts is, and give them some like universal examples. Like, I used to smoke many years ago. You're talking kind of in my early 20s, sort of late teens. And I'll be honest with you, it wasn't just cigarettes I smoked. I had a bit of a troubled youth, if I'm being totally honest with you. And so for me, when I was stopping smoking, it was like, a part of me, wanted to be healthy, but a part of me was like, the cigarettes were calling at me. It's like the chocolate from the fridge sometimes. They don't really speak to you, by the way. That's just in your mind. So it's kind of like, yeah. So even just giving an example like that, that people can relate to, and they go, oh yeah, and then you can say, is that a little bit like what's going on with you? And that can almost like, push them in that direction. Because to be honest, there's an argument to say that pretty much most problems that we have in life are actually parts. Because it's where we want something, but a part of us is stopping us.
Yeah.
So technically you could shoehorn them into it no matter what you do. But I think, ultimately your first port of call is you want to just see what naturally comes from the client based on what they say, and then see what techniques present themselves from that. But if you're struggling, you can kind of push them down a certain path and see if it fits.
That's very helpful.
Good answer. Good answer, that, Steve. And it makes a lot of sense.
A massively long anser to answer.
No. A good answer though. That's the important thing. No, it was. It did make sense. Did it make sense, that, Margaret? Are you happy with that?
Absolutely makes sense. Yeah, and I've got the gist of how to go about deciding in my head whether or not that would be an applicable way of working. My other question was around the current situation, Stephen, and about working with people who've got issues around fear, anxiety, dread around COVID virus. What would you suggest would be a way forward for working with those particular people? Because I couldn't use the fast forward treatment because it wouldn't particularly fit. So what would I do?
No. Again, it would really depend on the person's unique situation, because what we're noticing just now is, everybody is experiencing the COVID situation through their own filters, through their own map or model of the world. So one person's fear is going to be very different from another person's fear. So it's quite difficult to know a kind of one-stock solution. There are some similarities though that you'll find. What I tend to find, I don't know if you would agree, but I found COVID to be like one of the most really fascinating studies of human behaviour you'll ever. It's like we've never experienced this before, collectively. And it's like, it's been a scary situation, there's no doubt about it. But it's been really, really fascinating at the same time. The part of me that's obsessed with human behaviour has been looking on. And you tend to find that there's different groups of people. So you have like the blasé group, so people who just basically don't give a shit, and it's kind of usually they're a bit younger as well. Or strange enough, where I live, it's like a lot of older people seem to just don't care. It's like
I was just going to say that.
And they're all chatting together about
through the wall. Nothing can stop me.
Honestly, I go down to Aldi and they're all chatting to each other about COVID, and I'm thinking, should you not be shielding? But anyway, so there's a kind of blasé group where it's like the super optimists who think this is never going to affect me. But then you have another group that you have like almost like kind of non-conformists, who basically think it's like an invasion of their civil liberties. Like, for example, we're having to wear masks when we go into supermarkets. I don't know if it's the same where you guys are, as of July the 12th, I think. So, and there's a lot of people complaining. It's not too bad, but some people are complaining that it's taken away their civil liberties. So they are very much non-conformists. Then you have the other group who are basically just neurotic messes. And these are the ones that, are going to need, a bit of help, when this comes out, when things start to kind of get back. Well, they are getting back to normal a little bit just now. There's going to be a lot of fear about, going to public places, going to bars. You guys have got the bars open down in England, of course, so far. There's going to be a lot of kind of angst that's been built up over quite a long period of time now. And then, of course, you have another group, and that's people who have had COVID and, have experienced the physical symptoms, but have also experienced some most likely quite traumatic psychological things as they go through it, because they've been so uncertain. So I think it is about, first of all, just ascertaining, what is going on with each person, making it very, very, an individual solution for each person. What is your fear, or what is your angst of the situation, of the future? What you will find is, I don't know if you done like timeline. Did you do timeline therapy, or?
Yeah.
I have, but that doesn't mean everybody in the group has.
We all touched on it, Stephen. I've done it on your course, studio orientation time and timeline. We did touch on it, and some of us.
We didn't do a course on it, and I know there are courses out there. So.
Sure. Well, if you've checked out the hypnotherapy course I do on Udemy, there's a big massive section on how to use timeline interventions using hypnotherapy. That's a really good thing when it comes, for me, this is generally the fallback for things like anxiety, the bigger problems like depression. Because what you find is like people who are really not so much overreacting, but people who are really neurotic about the COVID situation, it's you'll probably find that they were kind of like that before the COVID situation anyway, but COVID has magnified it massively. So that's almost like being the thing that their deep, dark, fears and problems has hooked onto. So a lot of the time it's useful to even just take away the COVID issue and just look at what type of person they are and what's going on for them. And I generally kind of go back, I'll do like a fairly detailed personal history. So I'll go back through their past and look for times in the past when they have been anxious. And then I'll use the timeline process to let go of a lot of those emotionally traumatic memories. And then when you do that, that usually makes a real big difference to how they feel in the moment. But you're absolutely right about the rewind technique, or the fast phobia technique. One of the stages in the fast phobia technique is where you almost like ridicule the memory, and that's not quite.
No.
It's not really going to work. I mean, a lot of people who are maybe experiencing like PTSD, they don't want you like playing silly music in the background and you ridiculing the problem. It's just you're not really, if you're doing that, you're not really using your social intelligence, I don't think, because it mismatches what they're experiencing. But something like timeline, where you go back to the past and you help them, let go of some of the previous memories that have been problematic, that can really make a massive difference. When it comes to anxiety, one of the things I've found is it's pretty much always a safety thing, a safety and protection thing, because anxiety is a fear-based primal emotion. It's where we feel like we are not safe. Not even so much that we feel like we're not safe, we believe that we're not safe. So I think if you spend some time just getting the person into a really nice, safe place where they feel protected, get them feeling those feelings, because there's a good chance they might be quite alien to them if they've experienced a lot of anxiety. And then from there, you've got them in a good place, you can then start to work with that, whether you take that safety feeling back into the past, you do some timeline interventions with it, or whether you do some other things in hypnosis. There's lots of different approaches you can take. But I think ultimately your goal with that would be to get them to feel and believe that they're safe, get them to realize, I'm okay, I'm going to live, that there is a brighter future, I'm going to be better. And I think if you can get that across to them, then you really make a big difference to their life. A lot of the time the anxiety just disappears when they get that sense that they know that they're safe, that they know they're protected.
Thank you, Stephen. That's been very helpful.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Yeah, great answer. Big answer again. But there's no such thing as a short answer, is there?
It's rare to do short answers, John, honestly.
Of course, we're not just talking, of course, with the COVID thing, we're not just talking about anxiety and worry. We've got, and we won't mention names, Gemma, OCD. Gemma's laughing. Thank God she's laughing. People washing their hands. Now, obviously, these people are already OCD. Wow, what a thing that is. Like, they're going to be doing it all the time and they can't stop. So we've got loads of problems that have come up with COVID. But like I say, a massive amount of different issues that we've all got to deal with. So there's no one answer, is there? The idea of us as a hypnotherapist or as a therapist needs to figure that out. Don't we? We need to talk to the person and find out exactly what's going on before. There's no one answer. Kenzo, you had a question, didn't you, Kenzo? In Spain, are you there? Still in Spain, Kenzo?
I did. Sorry, I had to turn my microphone on. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I had a question because I noticed on Udemy that you have a course around hypnotic metaphors, and I think it's called transformational storytelling.
Yeah.
And I read the course description, and I was thinking about buying the course. Actually, it's just I've got a few online courses that I've started or need to start, so I thought I'd do them first. But I was just interested in that concept and what it actually is, and the practical reality of how you incorporate that into hypnosis, and when and how you'd use that with clients. Yeah.
I love storytelling. I think I think it's it can be such a powerful form of change. There was a really interesting study done quite a few years ago. I read it in a book. I can't remember exactly who did the study or when, but they wanted to figure out what was more powerful when it comes to affecting a person's thinking and the way that they appreciate the world, whether it was non-fiction books or fiction books. Now, most people would think it would be non-fiction books because it's imparting information, it's teaching you a subject, etc., etc. But what they found was actually it was mostly fiction books had a bigger impact on the way that we think and feel as human beings. And the reason why they thought that was that because when you're reading a non-fiction book, your critical faculty is quite active. So you're analysing the material that's going in, you're critiquing it. So a lot of the time it gets blocked. So the message sometimes you sometimes don't agree with the message. Whereas when you read fiction books, if you're really being entertained by stories, then you're in a very particular state of mind. You go into trance. It's basically a trance induction. So you're in that much kind of nicer, sort of softer place, and the message slides in without you even realising it. It's like, I don't know if any of you have got kids, but when you read your kid a bedtime story, some of the bedtime stories are pretty crazy, I have to say. There's all sorts of trouble I've noticed, like in kids' stories, but there's always themes within the stories. And whenever you read that to a kid, the kids, you capture the kid's imagination, and the themes subtly are embedded in. And I think that's one of the major power of stories, is that when you start to tell a story to someone, then it induces a state of trance, because we just, especially if it's told well, and people get kind of really pulled into this narrative, and then within the narrative you can actually subtly start to embed certain ideas, and you can start to embed the solution to the person's problem. Because often when we're trying to kind of when we're trying to resolve a problem head on, you often get some resistance. I guess it's similar to reading non-fiction sometimes. The critical faculty is very high, and that's often why we use hypnosis to lessen that. But when we start to tell a story, it almost like acts as a simulator for the person to step out of their problem temporarily and then start to kind of consider a solution from a slightly more dissociated place. And it also engages the imagination and really activates all the neural networks. So in terms of when you're using it, when you're doing therapy, so many different purposes for it. Stories are very much, they're an example of multi-level communication. But one of the things, I don't know if you did any study, when you were doing your hypnotherapy course, did you study Milton Erickson a lot? There was a lot of that, yeah. So basically, Milton Erickson used to have a technique called My Friend John, not named after you, John. A different John. Maybe it was.
Different era.
I don't know. I don't think it is. But so basically, when the client would come in, Erickson had quite a simple. Erickson didn't do much. He just did what he did. He did extremely well. And also, I've done a lot of training with a guy called Stephen Gilligan, And Ericsson had this amazing sense of rapport. I mean, apparently if you sat next to Ericsson, it just felt like he was peering into your soul. It was just incredible. Stephen Gilligan's very much similar as well, but anyway. And so Ericsson used to have a very simple technique where he would ask the person to talk about the problem. So he would evoke the problem state, and then he would just kind of break off and go, that's really interesting. That reminds me of my friend John. And we had a conversation, and then he would just go off on this tangent and talk about this conversation he had with my friend John, with his friend John. And then within the conversation, within the story, would actually be the solution. He would start to draw parallels between the client's life and John's life. Now, was John real? I don't know. If he was real, he was the most unlucky human being on the planet because he had every known psychological ailment, you know, because he would use it all the time.
That's not me.
My friend John had anxiety.
That's not me.
Definitely different John. So it's a really nice little carrier for a solution, and it can be done really subtly as well because people love it. So the my friend John technique is a really great one. You know, you can just say, well, you can change that and you can say, I've got a friend who had something similar, and one of the things that I said to him was this, and you can then start to kind of give the client some suggestions. That last bit is actually where you can make use of quotes within your stories as well. Richard Bandler, the co-creator of NLP, some of you will know him, some of you don't know him. I did my early trainings. He's a bit of a lunatic. He's not everybody's cup of tea. He's a genius, but he's a bit of a maniac. He used to say stories and quotes are great for insulting people and not having to take the responsibility. So, for example, if you hated your boss, then you could walk up to him and go, funny thing happened to me the other day. I was going for lunch and I was walking down the street, and this guy walked up to me and looked at me in the eye and said, "You're an absolute arsehole." So, and obviously it's the guy that's saying it, but you're using the guy, you're using a character within the story to transmit the message. Now, don't do that, by the way. That's Bandler. I don't believe half the stories Bandler says. I mean, I think he lies, but he uses stories for a purpose. But yeah, so I guess the general idea is stories are almost like become a safe space, like a kind of carrier, like a simulator, that you can introduce some solutions so that the person can dissociate from their problem, draw parallels from it, and then start to step into those solutions as well. Really powerful. And that's only like one use of stories. You can use it for lots of different things. You can use it in teaching. Stories, amazing. You can use it if you want to introduce an idea to the client. You can use it to influence an emotional state as well. Amazing. You know, really, really worth it. Definitely buy the course. I would recommend it.
I was just about to say, yeah, that's really interesting. I'm going to buy the course.
On that note, by the way, if you are interested in any of the courses, let me know, because what I can do is I can create like discount coupon codes.
Yeah.
It actually helps me as well because you get full commission from the discount codes too. So and it allows you to get the courses for as cheap as you possibly can. Because I think you'll notice on Udemy they do that thing where they pretend that they have sales all the time. It's like what's 200? It's like, I don't. So and you just have to wait until it's a good deal. So I'd be happy to send you like some discount codes for the courses if you want to check them out. Absolutely.
That's
okay, thanks. That's brilliant. Yeah.
Well, if anybody is interested, if you just email me or message me or go on WhatsApp, and then I'll contact Stephen, and then we'll take it from there. That's good. A good answer again. Happy with that, Kenzo?
Yeah, really good answer.
Can I just ask something? Is this kind of work really good for children?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I haven't really worked with children that much. I mean, I have worked with some teenagers and some young kids, but I think children tend to be in my business partner Brian Costello, which is obviously what I'm coming. He's done a lot of work with teenagers in particular, but I mean, I have seen quite a few clients who are kids, and it does work really well because kids tend to be, they haven't yet, depending on the age, they haven't yet developed the critical faculty quite as much as adults. So especially if you're doing some sort of hypnotic work, kids are in trance all the time. I mean, they go from one state of trance to another, to another, to another, and they're amazing hypnotists as well. They pull you into their trances. So they are really, really imaginative. I think if you're using hypnotherapy, hypnosis, for some reason, I can understand a lot of parents might freak out if they think you're hypnotizing their kids. And that's more because they don't understand what hypnosis is. Of course, there's a lot of misconceptions. So I tend to like to kind of reframe it. So I'll call it like an imagination game, or I'll call it like let's play a kind of role-playing game type sort of thing. Excuse me. But kids can be really good at it. One thing you notice, especially with young kids, is they can be very fidgety, and it's like they're not concentrating, but don't let that fool you. They absolutely are. They're just kids tend to have a lot of kind of extra energy like that, but they are deeply imaginative. There was one kid I was working with quite a few years ago now, and something had happened, and he couldn't go back to school. So I think he was in secondary school, so I think he was 12 or 13. And he had a bad experience at school, and he felt that he couldn't go back. And he hadn't been to school for, I think it was at least 2 months. And his parents were obviously really, really concerned. So what I did was I had a conversation with him, and he loved playing video games. Now, I'll be honest, I'm a bit of a geek. I'm a bit of a nerd. I quite like video games too. So even though I'm 43 this year, I don't think I'll ever stop doing that. But anyway, so I know a bit about video games. And I said, okay, well, what's your favourite video game? And he went, oh, Halo. And now, again, apologies if you can't relate to this example, if you don't know video games. But
I'm a gamer, so I'm okay with this.
Oh, you know too?
Yeah.
What coincidence. So there's a character in Halo called Master Chief, who's a really kind of strong, dominant character. And that was his favourite character. So what I did was, there's a process called deep trance identification. I don't know if you've ever learned it before, where you induce a state of trance and you get a person to identify with a mentor, identify with someone who has the resources they think they lack. So you actually get them to step into the shoes while they're in trance. So I just did that with Master Chief from Halo. Now, I didn't really say, now I'm going to hypnotize you, etc., etc. It was just, look, let's just play this little imagination game. And that gave him the strength. And I said, just imagine you had that confidence, that strength when you're going into school. And that was all it took. He went to school the next week. And it was like, wow, it was very, very simple intervention. And again, I guess to hook back to one of the things that Margaret said earlier on, it's very much about appreciating what the client is thinking, what their map or model of the world is, and then almost like kind of building on from there. And I think that's often where the really cool change work happens. Kids definitely works really well with them. You just have to slightly reskin it sometimes, and play a game and have fun. And also the last thing is, it's sometimes you want to almost like kind of distance yourself from the parents a little bit too. It's like you kind of have to be like the kind of the cool person that they're. If you can, it's pretty hard sometimes. But so because sometimes if you're acting like the parent, kids often don't really listen to their parents much. So you're firing off.
We can all agree with that one, couldn't we?
That's going to help. Yeah, no, totally.
Well, listen, Stephen, you've got about 15 minutes, haven't you, Steve?
Yeah, sure.
You're heading for Edinburgh. So you don't know about these. I've got some quick fire questions for you.
Intimidating. It's like an interview.
We're going to analyse you, basically.
Oh, okay.
So, are you ready for this?
I am
just
as
like
ready
a
as I can be.
TV interview, this, I'll tell you. Parkinson's hat on. What's the best piece of advice you've received in anything?
Ooh. That's a really tricky question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is so he's actually one of my friends. He's also he does a lot of NLP training. It's a guy called Owen Fitzpatrick. I don't know if you've heard of him. I've known him for quite a few years. He's co-written a lot of books with Richard Bandler. So we used to, so we're quite friendly. He used to come over and do some training with us in Scotland the last few years. So he years ago, because he was actually helping out on the very first practitioner course that I went on, and he said it wasn't then he gave me the advice, but he said do as many different things with as many different people in as many different places as you possibly can. And he says, because the reason why that can be so powerful is because it just enriches and broadens your map of the world. And it also protects you from getting hooked into limiting ways of thinking and limiting ways of believing, limiting beliefs, because you have a much richer experience of the world. And I think it's been such a useful piece of advice. Now, that doesn't mean that you emigrate to Australia or
Spain.
Yeah, it's a bit closer. It doesn't mean that you like travel constantly. Just wherever you can, just like have different experiences with different people in different places and different cultures. Try different activities that you maybe don't think you would normally do. I love to salsa dance. I started doing that about 6 or 7 years ago because I was just so bad at dancing, and I thought, yeah, why not? This is very different, and it's sometimes it's the unique things that can make the biggest difference to your life, So I think, just really kind of just experiment with different things, and it'll also give you lots of different examples to draw from. You'll be able to relate to so many different people. Your rapport skills will improve, and it's just a lot of fun as well. So.
Yeah,
I think that comes to mind. I'm sure it's one of these things. I probably think of something else when you
perfect. And no, I think that's a perfect.
I think,
and most of these will agree that is my life.
Is that right?
Absolutely, they're all nodding. That's how I live. And I recently, just to tell you all, I recently bought a trumpet. So I bought a trumpet. So
demonstration.
No. No, not yet. Maybe another time we can arrange another one. So yeah, I love that. That's a great answer. So another one, quick one. This is really strange, this one. Unconscious mind or subconscious mind?
Yeah, I used to always think unconscious mind because I learned through Richard Bandler, and that's what he used all the time. I believe Erickson kind of switched it to the unconscious mind too. Apparently Bandler used it as an embedded command when he says, your unconscious now wants to learn. So he's saying you are unconscious now. But to be honest, so I used to always use the unconscious, but what I found is that it was actually quite confusing for people because, and I think it is quite confusing because people think, if I'm in a state of unconscious, then I'm asleep, or somebody's hit me on the head with a blunt object, and I've become unconscious. And when you're doing hypnosis work, you're not unconscious. You're kind of in that sort of weird sort of semi-states. Sometimes people get nearly full amnesia, so you could say they're getting close to being unconscious, but not really. I mean, it's not the same thing. So I actually think subconscious now is a better way to think about it, in my opinion, because it's a bit more accurate. You're looking to tap into things that are just below the conscious mind, rather than making someone unconscious. So I think even just from the hypnotist point of view, I think it confuses you because you're thinking this person's responding, they should be unconscious. It doesn't make much sense. So I think I've changed now. So I've gone to the subconscious. I think the reason why likes of Bandler and stuff and Erickson changed it to unconscious because they wanted to distance themselves from Freud. Now I don't know this if this is completely true, but Bandler slags off Freud constantly. Now, Freud's got some amazing things, I don't slag Freud off. He's got some really strange things as well, of course. But so I think that was the reason why they kind of moved to the unconscious, was because from a branding perspective, they wanted to distance themselves from Freud and psychotherapy in general at that time. But psychotherapy has came on leaps and bounds since then. So I prefer subconscious, definitely.
Okay,
that gets the vote for me.
Answer.
No, I'm a bit of a blather.
Right, well,
I'm a blather.
You've got 10 minutes. Here's another one for you. Describe yourself as a teenager in 3 words.
Do you really want to know? As a teenager, wow.
3 words, Stephen, no more.
Okay, angsty but curious.
Oh, okay, good.
Angsty but curious. Yeah.
Like that. And what is your biggest pet peeve? What gets on your nerves the most?
Biggest pet peeve.
Sorry about the language barrier there. I'm a Mancunian, so.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get peeve. I like it. Biggest pet peeve.
People asking questions.
I used to work before I quit my job many years ago. So I used to work in the oil and gas industry. So I'm from a kind of more engineering background, which may reflect in my training, to be honest. But so I like to understand things. But Now this is just a stupid thing, but for some reason it's become anchored. It's there was a guy who I don't know if I have a spoon here, but it was a guy I worked with, years ago, and he used to go and make a cup of coffee, and he used to have his spoon, and he would go. And for some reason that drove me absolutely insane. And maybe I should give myself therapy on it, because every time I hear it now, I'm like, what?
Oh dear.
But it doesn't affect my life too much, I've not attacked anyone yet because of it. So
just a chinking of a spoon.
So I think annoying noises like that can sometimes be. I'm quite auditory, so annoying noises that just keep on kind of seem to annoy me for some reason.
One more question, Stephen, and I will leave you alone then. Name a book that you've read that positively shaped you, and not that one.
No. Oh yeah, you can buy my book if you want.
Yeah. Just plugging in.
Thank you so much for the plug.
That's all right. But one book that positively shaped you.
One book that positively shaped me. I think it has to be the very first book I read on hypnotherapy and in NLP, which was The Hypnotic World of Paul McKenna. When Paul McKenna used to have hair, and he was a bit chubbier as well, and he lost weight, and now he's going to go back again. But when he was still doing his stage hypnosis stuff, because I was really fascinated. Paul McKenna was a bit of a hero of mine when I was younger. I did training with him, and he gets a bit of stick, to be honest.
It's funny. I'll just jump in on you, because the lad Dave Woolley that taught us, every time somebody says Paul McKenna, he goes.
Yeah. I mean, I met him a few times because I assisted on a lot of the Bander stuff, and he did. I mean, I can understand why people might not like him, and he does get a bit of stick, but I've got a bit of a soft spot for him because it was his book that first introduced me to hypnosis. The stuff he does is very stock, let's be honest, and he does things. It's for show, like it looks good on camera, but then how solid does the change work? But yeah, he is good at stuff. He is good at showman stuff. But his teaching and a lot of the stuff was a lot better than what people give him credit for. He did a really good job on the courses that I was on. So I generally defend him a little bit. So but yeah, so the Hypnotic World of Paul McKenna, simply because I think I read it when I was like 18, and it was a pretty tough time for me. As I said, I was angsty but curious, and it was had a lot of kind of confidence issues. Possibly to do with what I'd been smoking around about that time as well, to be honest. And it's a tough time sometimes being a teenager, and certainly my school and my environment was quite rough as well. And I went to a private school for 2 or 3 months because my dad's a teacher and he got a job in a private school, and then he left, so I ended up going back to state school after 3 months. So I was the kid that clearly couldn't hack it at private school and thought he was better than everybody. So I had a bit of a tough time at school. So I think, almost like kind of reprogramming a lot of that stuff. And so in the book, The Hypnotic World of Paul McKenna, there was a technique. It was an anchoring technique where you think about times where you feel really confident, and then you kind of anchor it to a fist or a thumb and forefinger. And then you imagine a time where you want to be confident, and then you fire off the anchor again. And I did this technique religiously for a week. And then I went out socializing with my friends. And it was like, they were like, what did you do to yourself? It was like such a big transformation, just one simple technique. And I thought, wow, this stuff is really powerful. And I think for me, that was the moment where I decided this is the stuff this is what I want to do.
Life changing then. Not
yeah, that was the point where I thought, it doesn't matter. I feel young, but I'll check out. I'll go on a course. And I went on Paul McKenna's course, and yeah, so that book for me was, if I was to read it now, I'd probably rip it to shreds and hate it. But at the time, it was just the right book at the right place for me. It made a big difference, and I think that can often be the case with a book. Sometimes it's just the right message at the right time for the right person. So I would go for that one.
Very good. I'm sure everybody's just wrote that down, and his sales are going to go up along with that one, of course.
Well, yeah, I don't think Paul McKenna doesn't need help. That's for sure. He doesn't need help with his sales. He is a marketing wizard.
Our tutor would say otherwise, but anyway, so there you go. Listen, I'll let you go because I know you're off into Edinburgh, and I can only say thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. I'm sure everybody else has enjoyed it.
Thank you,
thank
Stephen.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you very much.
It's been great fun.
Thank you very much.
Great fun. Great to see you all.
So yeah, whenever you want, Stephen, you can disappear if you want, and then we'll let you go, and then we'll all talk about you.
Oh, well, of course. Yeah, that's the way it happens, you know.
Only nice things.
Well, if you weren't talking about me, I'd be more worried. More worried.
Oh, you can stay as long as you want, of course.
Fantastic.
We're probably just going to waffle on with each other now, just for 10 minutes, while we all catch up with what we've been doing. But that was great, that, and hopefully we'll invite you back again, and maybe you'll accept.
Superb. See you later on.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, everybody.
Yep, that was good.
Yep, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
It's lovely.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's nice. I will give it a bit of thought if there's anybody else that I can invite, because I'm not a shy person, as you know. I will just ask.
No.
It's surprising. It's surprising what results you can get, and I think there's a little bit of a lesson in that as well. Sometimes, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of it. Just get out there and ask people. I mean, I think that was great that he joined us. He's a very well-known therapist in Scotland. You know, he's at the top of his tree. I've got his bio.
I think I was looking him up. Isn't he the director of the NLP section in Scotland?
Yeah. So
he founded it, didn't he? I was just reading up on him. It's quite impressive, and he takes time out to come and talk to
us.
A bunch of randomers, really.
Absolutely. I've been talking to him a few times on Messenger. Nothing, you know, out of the ordinary. But obviously, sometimes you can just strike a chord with people, can't you? And I think that's great. And you guys are all capable of doing that. And that needs to be put into your therapy, doesn't it? Because that's why we're doing it at the end of the day. And it's just hitting on that and not being afraid of it, and just, you know, accepting